Yes, the BYU basketball season is over, but is the real fun just beginning?
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's as simple as that. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. Coming up on today's show, we talk about BYU and BYU basketball, I should say, as they transition into the postseason and what to expect as they head into portal season. More importantly, we'll also talk about what they should do with the current roster construction, and we'll finish up today with a new commitment for the BYU football program in Ty Getchie, who announced he was committed to the Cougars over the weekend. All right, so let's dive right in on today's show. And I said in the open, is the real fun just beginning for BYU basketball? And in some ways it is. The biggest thing to understand about this period for BYU is Kevin Young and his staff are going to leave no stone unturned when it comes to the portal. They will chase big name after big name. I would fully expect you'll see a bunch of guys out there on social media being represented by different agents who will invoke the name BYU, whether it's legitimate or not, in terms of saying, hey, BYU's talking to my player here. Why would they do that? Well, here's the simple fact of the matter. BYU has got a proverbial, it's a legitimate pile of money when it comes to NIL. And the attraction to BYU is due to that, but also due to the fact that BYU has the number one prospect in the entire country, and AJ Dybantsa, coming to BYU to play next year. There are going to be a bunch of guys who are interested in playing alongside a guy of Dybantsa's caliber, his talent, everything that he has in his bag of tricks. He's currently at the McDonald's All-American game playing alongside the nation's best and brightest in terms of the top male and female prospects in the upcoming recruiting cycle, or the current recruiting cycle, I should say. And the thing is, BYU is going to be able to go out there and pitch guy after guy after guy on why they should ultimately decide that BYU is the place for them. It doesn't hurt. It absolutely does not hurt that BYU has money, and it comes in massive variety. BYU's NIL funds are inexhaustible, it feels like, at this point. I know that sounds crazy to say that, but everybody I have talked to, and I had some conversations with some people over the weekend who have said that BYU has got just an incredible amount of money that it's capable of spending. Will it spend all of it? That's TBD. But the nice part is BYU essentially can be in the mix for any player who has any interest in BYU. And if NIL is the holdup, well, the Cougars can outbid or hang with the top bidders for those respective players. That should excite you as a Cougar fan. Yes, I understand that there are going to be people out there saying, well, this is ruining collegiate sports. You know what? Collegiate sports is no longer collegiate in any shape or form. It's professional sports, everybody. These guys are making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, if you're a top tier prospect, whether it's in football or in basketball. It's simple fact of how things are constructed right now in the collegiate sports environment. These players are going to make oodles amount of money before they even go professional. And I know I've just said this is professional sports. Well, they don't have the professional moniker next to their name, even though they probably should. The nice part is BYU's in the game. They're in the thick of it, and they have got a massive reputation right now on the recruiting trail. A number of people out there have been talking about BYU and who they may chase in the transfer portal. I would say that anybody who has interest in BYU who's a top-tier guy, I would expect that BYU contacts them at minimum, engages their interest, and essentially says, hi, we're Coach so-and-so from Brigham Young University. You may have just seen us make a run to the Sweet 16. We're interested in you. Are you interested in us? And I would be surprised if many young men out there would say, thanks, but no thanks, Coach. Yes, there may be guys who the honor code at BYU, the academic restrictions, whatever it may be, may hold them back and may be the reason why that's a deal breaker for them. But the bigger point to be made here is the BYU basketball program is going to be a force for the foreseeable future when it comes to bringing in top-tier talent to Provo, and that should embolden you as a Cougar fan to believe that the Sweet 16, that could be the floor for this BYU basketball program going forward. Bringing in a guy of AJ Dybantsa's caliber next year, I think raises BYU's expectation levels even further than they were when Kevin Young took over at BYU. They made a run to the Sweet 16 this year. If you have a guy that is considered to be a generational type talent, AJ Dybantsa is the Elite Eight, BYU's first ever Final Four. What is the expectation level for BYU going to be next year? Because all I can say at this juncture, looking at it months down the line, is that it's going to be a very, very high bar to clear. But I also believe that Kevin Young, he says, bring it on. He absolutely wants BYU to be a top shelf, top tier program. He wants to be one of those teams that's talked about and feared in college basketball circles. It's awesome to consider that. BYU basketball has been really good for a really, really long period of time, even going back to the earliest days of BYU's intercollegiate era, that we're talking back to the 19 teens, even the 1900s. So over 100 years ago, BYU basketball has been a pretty darn good program. They had 2 national championships, if you believe the NIT to be that, in the 1950s. They've been to the NCAA tournament, I think, 32 times now without a Final Four appearance. It's the most appearances in the NCAA tournament without a Final Four. There is a lot going for BYU. They are uber competitive in basketball. But Kevin Young, he has ratcheted this up to an even higher degree. And once again, I don't believe he's going to shy away from the expectations that will come with the type of guys he expects and hopes to land as a head coach at BYU. He did a phenomenal job this past year putting together that roster in retrospect. Look at who he brought in and the pieces he's able to work together to become this juggernaut down the stretch run of the season. They had a 9-game win streak going into the semifinals of the Big 12 championship. They won a game in the NCAA tournament, 2 games in the NCAA tournament for the first time in 14 years. It's the first time they had won in the NCAA tournament in 14 years. He accomplished a ton, but the nice part is looking forward, he has got all the resources at his disposal to upgrade this roster and make what I would expect are going to be sky-high ambitions and expectations for this squad a reality next year. Now, you have to go out there and prove it once again. You have to find the right combination of guys. And obviously he pushed all the right buttons, everything you want to talk about with this year's squad. He's got to go out there and prove it again this coming season. And that's obviously something that will take time because we don't know what the entire roster construction is going to look like for BYU at this juncture. But I can tell you, having a guy just single-handedly in AJ Dybantsa coming in, that is going to elevate BYU's capability as a team. He looks like everything that any Cougar fan out there of any age has always hoped would end up at BYU, a top-tier candidate, a top-tier prospect who looks like he could go on to have a Hall of Fame type career at the professional level. He may be making a pit stop for just one season at BYU, but what could he accomplish in that one season? Hey, I'm excited to find out because I think many of you, just like me, are eager to see where he can take BYU next year. But the number one thing I think BYU needs to do with regards to NIL and the transfer portal is to look inward, obviously, while also looking outward. What do I mean by that? I'll explain next as you roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to have some fun when it comes to getting on the action like never before. Obviously, March Madness is here. Right now, new customer at $200 in bonus bets. When your first $5 bet wins, you get $200 into your account. Use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories to even who's cutting down the nets this coming weekend with the Final Four and obviously the national championship. Obviously, all of us have been tracking our brackets. Mine has been busted more times than I care to admit, but the nice part is you can stay in the mix and do it with our friends over at FanDuel. The app is super simple and easy to use, and when you win, you get paid out instantly. There's no waiting around for that money. So visit FanDuel.com to get on that college hoops action all tournament long. You still got another weekend to go if you want to get in on this. FanDuel.com, $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Go to FanDuel.com today to get started. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Post District. Now, Post District is here for you guys if you're looking for a new place to call home in the greater Salt Lake area. It's home to 4 of Salt Lake's newest and most stylish apartment buildings, the Register, Post House North, Post House South, and 801 Flats. Each residence offers its own unique take on luxury urban living with features like waterfall kitchen islands, floor-to-ceiling windows, vaulted ceilings, spacious patios, and walk-in closets. All the things that all of us want in our lives, it feels like. You also enjoy premium amenities, including the city's largest residential gym, a year-round pool, a golf simulator, massive TV wall for sports watching parties, maybe like the Final Four this coming weekend, and more, all anchored by a one-of-a-kind community. Step outside and find yourself immersed in Salt Lake's hottest dining and nightlife scene with award-winning spots like Urban Hill, Mencho Ramen, Level Crossing, Melancholy Wine Bar, and Sunday's Best just steps away, my friends. Get in on the action today, whether you're looking for a studio, 1, 2, 3-bedroom, or a penthouse. Find your perfect home today with our friends at Post District. Visit liveatpost.com or call 801-590-6247. That's 801-590-6247. Make sure to mention Locked On Cougar sent you for an exclusive incentive from our friends at Post District. Or also, once again, check them out today at liveatpost.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Good to be back in the saddle. Thank you for bearing with me while I was out last week celebrating my 10-year wedding anniversary with my lovely wife, Megan. Some of you may know her, is the brains behind this operation because she just takes care of everything else while I gallivant around and talk into a camera for part of my living. But nonetheless, big thank you to all of you for your well wishes and kind words as we celebrated 10 years together. But let's talk about BYU basketball and what they need to do looking forward here. Now, there are a bunch of guys BYU's contacting the portal. I could list off name after name after name, but the bigger point to be made here is BYU's got to look inwards, and they've already started doing that, it feels like. You have a guy like like Cannon Catchings, who decides it's in his best interest to explore his options by hitting the transfer portal. Hey, I wish Cannon well, and I don't know what the future holds for him, whether it's at BYU, whether it's in the NBA, whether it's at another university. You wish him well and say thanks for everything you offered to BYU in your season in Provo if it comes to that. BYU's also looking outside of it. They obviously have a bunch of guys that they are interested in, but none bigger apparently than Dominique Diomande, who already has signed with BYU according to reports from On3. He's a 6'7", 6'8" wing player who spent last year, much like Kadeem Mboop for BYU, enrolling at midseason and redshirting for the Washington Huskies. Once the season ended, he decided to enter the transfer portal, and BYU, just days after their season ends, have already added their first transfer portal product in Diomande. If you look at his skill set, he's a uber athletic player. He shows a lot of offensive capability, ability to shoot the three with a step back that looks like it's absolutely deadly. Also not afraid to attack the rim. Played for a pro team over in the French U21 league, ADA Blois. I don't know how you say that right. But he averaged 15.7 points, 5.9 rebounds, almost 2 assists, and almost 2 steals while shooting 37% from beyond the arc in that league. That's pretty good numbers. And this looks like a guy who is not a bring in and see how he develops. This is a guy who is going to have an impact for BYU next year. I would think right now, many people probably look at this as maybe a guy who could replace Mawit Mag because according to some of the reports out there, this is a kid who has been on top 50 lists for the NBA draft. And if he is the 3-and-D guy that some believe him to be out there, he's got more size and more skills, it looks like, than maybe what Mawit Mag offered. And Mawit Mag ended up being a very key piece for BYU. I think that you have the opportunity for Diomande to be even better than that for the BYU basketball team. But that does not even discount what BYU already has in their arsenal. I just invoked the name Kadeem Mboop because he was just in the same circumstance as Diomande, as a mid-year enrollee who redshirted. And Mboop is a guy that I myself have forgotten to mention, but he is an uber athletic product of the NBA Academy in Africa who BYU is very excited to see come along. I don't know where Mboop's ultimate position or future lies in terms of what he plays for BYU, but the physical skills you see on film from him are readily apparent. While I think a guy like Dybantsa, according to all reports, is probably a day one impact player for BYU next year, probably should be in the rotation at minimum, I don't know if Mboop's going to be in the rotation, at least at the outset of next season. The nice part is BYU's already been working with him, and with another 6-7 months of development before next season at minimum, what could he become under the tutelage of guys like BYU has on their coaching staff? I think there's a lot of excitement for him because he, much like Dybantsa here, is very long as an athlete, 6'8", 6'9", flashes a ton of potential as just a sheer athlete. But I wonder where his ultimate position lies on the basketball court. Is it as a wing player? Is it a 3-and-D guy? Can he be more than that? Or is he going to be stuck playing maybe the 4 spot for BYU? That's all into the future. But I think what BYU is trying to do right now is balance, obviously bringing in guys like Dybantsa via the transfer portal, while also prioritizing making sure that they keep their guys at home. I don't think that Cannon Catchings will be the first or the last guy to leave BYU's roster to hit the transfer portal this go-round. There's already been reports out there about other guys who should be leaving maybe as soon as today, if not sooner or later, in terms of hitting the portal. I don't think all of them are intent on leaving BYU, but the simple fact of the matter is they are looking to cash in on NIL. And that obviously is a way to cash in on that, whether you want to stay in Provo or not, is to go in the portal, see what your ultimate value is on the open market, and then turn around and say, okay, I'm willing to stick around. Here's my price. This is free agency, folks. I talked about this being a professional sport. It is. And BYU will have its fair share of guys on this roster who are absolutely incredible for this BYU basketball team this past season, looking for a payday. They may make in the 6 figures. They may be looking for 7 figures. Who knows what each player's individual circumstance may be. And some of them simply might be looking just for playing time, because it can be tough to be part of a successful program like BYU has shown to be this past season, but not be on the court. BYU played 10, 11 guys in the rotation. That was really, really cool to see. But there were other guys on that bench who had to be chomping at the bit saying, hey, I want to play. I want to have an impact. I want to have a feature role. Well, those feature roles may not ultimately reside in Provo, Utah. The big NIL payday some of them may be looking for may not reside in Provo, Utah either. You wish them well if they ultimately decide that their future is best served elsewhere. Do not denigrate these young men for an opportunity to go out and get money and be able to play the game that they love. It's a really, really tough circumstance that they find themselves in, and it can impact relationships when they decide to leave a program, hit the portal, and go elsewhere. But it's a business now. And that's the tough part about this is GMs of these different programs out there, they're making tough decisions as to who's going to be encouraged to be in the portal, because there may be guys on your roster that you're like, you know what, son, your services are no longer needed. You need to look elsewhere. And the business relationship, it goes both ways, and it cuts deep. It really does cut deep. But I think BYU's best interest is obviously to prioritize keeping their top shelf talent, guys like Richie Saunders, if he's interested, Jaeger Demon, if he's interested, in Provo, if at all possible, and make it worth their while financially to stick around. But also understand that other guys are going to leave, and then you replace them with guys like I've already talked about with Dominic Dybantsa. I am hoping to get more on Dybantsa that I'll pass along in future editions of the podcast, but at the outset, it looks like a very promising addition for BYU. And there's a reason why Washington and Danny Sprinkle, former Utah State head coach, wanted him in their program. BYU is the beneficiary of this, and I think right now you can already look and say, okay, Dybantsa looks like a great compliment for a guy like AJ Dybantsa to play off of. If he can truly set in the corner, hit 37+% from 3, that's exactly what BYU wants to have next year. And more importantly, if he can bring it on the defensive end of the court and be able to play switching defense. The peel and switch is what BYU has been trying to implement, but hasn't had the athletes to implement it fully. Could Dybantsa be that next level of athlete that BYU needs to get to that? I hope so. So it's a very interesting time to track all this for BYU, because like I said, I could list name after name after name of guys BYU is talking to, reportedly talking to, maybe talking to. But in the end, the biggest goal is to put together the best collection of talent you possibly can, surround a guy like AJ Dybantsa with the best talent that will complement and enhance what he already does as a feature player, and then see where the chips fall and see how far you can advance next year in March Madness. Crazy, crazy times when it comes to BYU basketball, but exciting times all the same. It's a really, really fun time to track it. And we'll be sure to pass along news and notes about individual players that have, I think, the type of talent that could make impacts for BYU in future editions of this podcast. All right. We've talked a lot of basketball today. Let's flip over and talk some BYU football coming up next. BYU got a commitment via the high school ranks this past weekend. Who is Ty Getchie, and what does he offer to the BYU football program? It's a good question you ask, and we'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades. That's our friends over at Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online, my friends. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right, and more importantly, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service. You always find the real person that you need to talk to when you need it. And for trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like dedicated phone lines, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, so now it is your turn to take advantage of that yourself. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com to get started today. Once again, that's supplyhouse.com using the promo code SH5. Thank you once again for being Locked On Cougars, your first listen of the day. We just talked a lot about BYU basketball and transfer portal. Well, if you want the latest and greatest when it comes to news breaking on that front, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a very impactful time for BYU basketball. We'll be sure to keep you up to date if you join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group today. Hit the link in the show notes below. Just $5 a month to be a part of the group. But more importantly, get a full 2 weeks, 14 days of a free trial before you're charged anything to be part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. BYU football got a nice commitment over the weekend from Ty Getchie out of Cherry Creek, Colorado. Who is Ty Getchie, Jake? Well, it's a good question you asked, and some of you have probably been looking into this over the weekend, but he is a tight end prospect at 6'7", 225 pounds, who is a high 3-star talent according to 24/7 Sports. I know that 3 stars are where BYU has made their hay in recent years, but Ty Getchie, this is not your typical 3-star talent. Let's just put it this way. He is getting offers from all over the place. He has started to really blow up, and the fact that he committed to BYU at this juncture, I think, tells us a lot about what he thinks of the Cougar football program, and more importantly, his role within it. He had offers from Michigan, Penn State, Florida, Auburn, Texas A&M, Utah, and other top-tier programs who were interested in having him visit, and he had set up a number of official visits for the summer, including one to BYU, but he decided in the last few days, apparently, to short-circuit all that, and he may take some visits still in the coming days and months, but the bigger point is he decided that BYU is where he wanted to be, and he pounced on the offer from Brigham Young University. He is a guy that has seen his just star rise, and I use the term star rise. It's crazy to watch what he has accomplished in the past few months. He didn't have a scholarship offer until it felt like earlier this year, like kind of like February period. I think our friends over at 24/7 Sports, no, it was Sports Illustrated, excuse me. The guys over Casey Lundquist said that he got his first offer from Utah State. Let's see if I can find this here as I'm going along. He got it back in February, I believe is what the report was. But then he decided the BYU is where February 11th, 35 days after he received his first offer, he picked up 20 more offers. Obviously, Utah State, the start, but then BYU in the mix, along with 20 other programs. He is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I believe he does have mission plans. So that obviously played a role in his relationship with BYU. But I didn't have, for whatever reason, the link wasn't working when I was going to talk. I was going to throw up his film so you guys could watch his huddle highlights, but for whatever reason, the link didn't want to cooperate as I was recording this. The bigger point to be made is go look at Ty Getchie's highlight reel on Huddle, and you can see that this kid has got skills. 6'7", obviously tall, rangy athlete with an incredible catch radius, but he's got a basketball background, and he approaches catching the football with that mentality. You hear a lot high pointing the football. And what that means is when you're rebounding, obviously, you're trying to out jump guys on the basketball court to get up and get that basketball before anybody else can get it. It's called high pointing. Well, football is the same thing. You put guys in positions like a Taigechi in this circumstance and say, hey, we're going to toss a ball up in the air. You're going to go up there and get it, get your feet on the ground and score a touchdown or get a first down. He has got all those skills, and you can see it on his highlight reel. I really wish I was able to show you guys and kind of highlight it as we were going along discussing this, but I think that this is a really, really savvy pickup for BYU, even if he is going on a mission right away out of high school. Couple of years on the mission field, his body will mature, obviously, but at 6'7", he has got an incredibly long frame that obviously could pack on more than 225 pounds. The fact he's already 220 pounds plus, that's just an added bonus, because you also see on his highlight reel, he's willing to block. There are a lot of tight ends out there who play as big size wide receivers, and he's played that for Cherry Creek, which is one of the top tier programs in the Colorado prep ranks. But he has played a myriad of roles: inline tight end, H-back, and also some wide receiver. And you see every skill that you want to see from a pass catching tight end who also can double as that inline tight end who's willing to stick his nose in there and block. It's really, really cool to see this. It's cool to see him decide that BYU is where he wanted to be, because he easily could have let this process play out and kept BYU on the line for months, if not years, it feels like. But he decided that BYU is where he wanted to be and pounced on an offer. And a guy like Kevin Gilbride as BYU's tight ends coach, he's got to be very ecstatic to have him in the fold, even if it will be 2 or 3 years before you ultimately see him suiting up for the Cougars, because it's kind of that weird dynamic about BYU recruiting. Is you want to get excited about guys like Taigechi and the opportunity they have to impact BYU football, but you also have to temper those expectations by saying, hey, well, we'll see you after you serve a mission for 2 years. Maybe you take a year to get back into shape. But I think everything you see on the highlight reel for Taigechi should tell you that this is a kid that's well worth the recruiting efforts BYU put into him, and the offers that he garnered over a month period, essentially from February to this month, show you this is a kid who has got a ton of ability, and programs nationwide have absolutely taken notice of him, and BYU is the beneficiary of it. It wouldn't surprise me in time if a guy like Getchy, if he has a really, really big year this coming year, sees himself enter 4-star territory. He's got that type of skill set, but it also doesn't stop BYU from adding other tight ends like a Brock Harris, because Brock, who is a top 50 talent in this recruiting cycle, is obviously a guy BYU would love to land. Adding Taigechi does not stop them in any way, shape, or form of adding another tight end of Brock Harris's or other tight ends of renown that BYU may be interested in this recruiting cycle. BYU's tight end unit could use guys who are obviously play first players, but also guys who are on missions like a Getchy, and you just kind of balance it as you go along. The whole goal of college football is getting the best talent available to you. And a guy like Taigechi, he is a supreme talent. So you get him in the fold and see what becomes of it down the line. I think this is a marvelous pickup for BYU football. I think that a guy like Taigechi has got just potential written all over him, because you already see a bunch of the skills. Once again, you watch that highlight reel and you're kind of left saying, all right, this kid's really, really good. But consider he hasn't been playing football really all that long. And you consider what he's already accomplished and the offers he's getting, that type of stuff. And it means that, hey, the best absolutely is yet to come for this young man as he continues to kind of hone his craft, learn more about playing the tight end position, gets better at blocking, gets better at high pointing footballs, gets better just at playing the position as a whole. I knocked my mic there. But I really, really like what he flashes on film. And I think the BYU has got a major recruiting win and getting Taigechi into the fold right now. He's the 4th member of the 2026 recruiting cycle. And this is one that can be very impactful for BYU if certain recruits ultimately decide that they want to be a part of it. But I think Taigechi, he's already shown a lot of ability. And I think, once again, the future is very, very bright for this young man, and BYU should be the beneficiary along the way as he goes about just doing what he does as a tight end in Provo down the line. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. As always, thank you for your just subscribership. Is that the right term to say? Your patronage, whatever you guys want to term it. Thank you for the support. As always, it absolutely means the world to me that you guys enjoy the content as much as you do. And as always, please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. Tell them about this daily podcast that's got a bunch of intel on BYU sports, and have them be a part of the family that we're building here, the community we're building over here at Locked On Cougars. But once again, thank you as always for your support of the podcast. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day. And to all of you who are everydayers, thank you as always for being just that right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.